So I've often said one of the best things to do on Brexit is to look at how other countries report on Brexit. And let's face it, in Europe, they don't care. Brexit has not been on their front pages, well, for months. Even this current chaos, it's nowhere to be found in the press. You have to really go out and look for articles now to get sort of another shall we say, European perspective. However, today we've got one from the Washington Post. Now, in fairness, this is done by Ian Dunt. However, he will have been writing a perspective to Americans who don't know in general what's going on. Now, I've said continuously Ian Dunt is one of the best people currently in the UK writing on Brexit. If you want to know what's going on with Brexit, you know, go to politics.co.uk, look him up, and, you know, he's got a full biography of articles on Brexit that pretty much charts this entire process. And I'm very much in the belief that his articles in the future will be used as historical evidence of just what the hell was going on. So, this is Ian Dunt in the Washington Post. So, this is the collective madness behind Britain's latest Brexit plan. The nation is ignoring reality as deadlines loom. On Tuesday, British Prime Minister Theresa May demanded that her party reject her own Brexit plan so that she could go back to negotiations with the European Union and dismantle an agreement that her government reached with the continent. That alone, that statement alone, think about this. Theresa May has said she wants to dismantle the agreement she had already reached with the European Union to go back to argue for something that we already know is impossible. just let that sink in, because this is again part of the wonderfulness, I think, of this article, because it's sort of trying to explain to non-readers, non-people who've been following Brexit in this way. So it's good in this way how it comes to explain all of this stuff. So, on an impossible fast timeline, during talks that have already been ruled out on every level, it is an insane way to behave. The British government is actively sabotaging the work it has spent the last 2 years completing and then doing a victory dance. The problems all lie with something called the Irish backstop. You wouldn't know it given how deranged the party has become about it, but it is a conservative idea. Their problem was simple. They wanted two contradictory things. On one hand, the Brexit campaign during the referendum promised to take back control of Brussels. That meant returning regulatory decision-making to London. But on the other, it promised that everything would continue as before with no effect on trade. That is impossible, because as soon as you take back regulatory powers, you have delays on the border with Europe. The whole issue with the border is based on the concept of trust. In the European Union, member states share laws, courts, and enforcement procedures. They know that the rules on the rules on the slaughter of cattle, the electronic components of cars, or the chemical compounds in children's toys are all the same. They cannot take someone to court if something goes wrong, even if they're in another country, because they have the same institutions. This creates trust, and that is why goods cross over national borders freely with no checks. That has been particularly crucial in Ireland. After years of conflict, peace was reached in the 90s on the basis of continued cooperation between the north and south of the island. and that meant, more than anything, an open border between the Republic and the Republic in the south and the British Northern Ireland in the north. But then Brexit came and blew it all to pieces. Instead of grappling with the hard choices the vote required, May pretended that Brexiteers could have everything they wanted. London would get back control of regulatory decisions, and the border with Ireland would stay open. The fact that these two promises are incompatible was never addressed. She just kept on pretending that it was all possible and that people should have greater faith. Then there was a weird and very un-British, quasi-religious undercurrent to all this, a sense that things would work out if you just believed them hard enough. Also discernible were a hatred of practical judgment and a bubbling tide of chest-beating jingoistic nationalism. Brexit was a political project based on the idea that identity politics could answer technocratic questions. If the technocratic question keeps proving problematic, you just have to have more faith in your identity. It was like trying to unlock a door with a thin slice of bread. That culture has not changed since the 2016 referendum, which is partly why of the problem we are in now. In the past week alone, 3 interviews exhibit the key and fevered puritanism of that Brexit has triggered. Conservative Member of Parliament Mark Frankenos responded to a letter from the German CEO of Airbus warning that the company might move its factories out of Britain by tearing it up live on television and saying, "My father, Reginald Falkus, was a D-Day veteran. He never submitted to bullying by any German, neither will his son." A former trade minister, Digby Jones, claimed that negotiations are failing because of difficulties because, quote, "the Remainers and especially the establishment elite have set about sabotaging Brexit." One Brexit supporter interviewed on the street by the BBC about warnings from retailers over supply chains insisted that it would do the country good to go without food. This is unbelievable. The fact that you have lots of companies who have now said, right, we're now starting the process to leave, and are leaving, and those jobs are going to leave and never come back. You've only got to look at the banking sector, where new jobs and jobs have moved to Dublin, to Paris, to Frankfurt, to Amsterdam. You know, this is one of the things that I've said continuously separates the British Eurosceptics from the European Eurosceptics. That at some point, the European Eurosceptics accepted the fact that the single market was a good idea, that it worked, and that really they couldn't argue against it. The British Eurosceptics, on the other hand, decided that the single market was the absolute devil and must be rejected at all costs. And this is what separates British Euroscepticism from European Euroscepticism. And also, you have, as again, you look at all these things, this guy referring to the fact that his dad was a D-Day veteran and won't submit to German, bullying. This is the CEO of Airbus basically saying, look, my business will be better served being in the EU, no longer in the United Kingdom. There was this belief, I don't know if Ian goes into this later in the article, but there was this belief that, especially announced by Nigel Farage and other people like him, saying that the German car industry will come and be the saviour of us, that they will force Angela Merkel to do a deal. That has not happened. The German car industry came out very quickly. I think it was it was not long after the vote. I think it was in early 2017, and came out and said, no, we support the single market. We like the single market. You know, if Britain leaves the single market, we will pull our companies out of the UK. that is what they said, and yet this idea that they will somehow come and save them persists, because a few weeks ago Nigel Farage said the exact same thing, that somehow the German car industry and that the Prosecco industry in France is somehow going to force the government to do a deal. That has not happened. And again, it's all based on this bizarre religious belief in Brexit. And it's difficult to say where it's come from. So anyway, he continues. For the first 2 years in power, May kept peace with this new political culture. She acted like everyone's Brexit dreams would come true, and no trade-offs were ever to be made. And then last summer, her Brexit strategy finally acknowledged reality. This involved the Irish backstop. It was an insurance policy. It said that sure. There we go. Oh, sorry, it's just an advert just popped up and just cocked up everything. There we go. It was an insurance policy. It said, "Oh, go away, Christ's sake." It said that sure, Britain could look for ways to maintain an open border with Ireland while taking control of regulatory decision making. But if that failed, which it would, Northern Ireland at least would have to lock into the EU's regulatory infrastructure, so the EU would know that the rules on things like cattle slaughter, electronic components for cars, the chemicals in children's toys, etc., were all the same. This would allow the border to stay open without the need for checks. In essence, it promised that if the fairy tales failed, reality would take over on a strict timetable. The plan was May's baby. She negotiated it. She even demanded it to be extended from Northern Ireland to the whole of the United Kingdom. But it was just too much a bleak practical reality for the Brexiteers. So when she brought it to the House of Commons almost 3 weeks ago, lawmakers smashed it into a million pieces with a historic government defeat. After she reeled for a couple of weeks, Tuesday night saw May finally regain some sort of initiative. She grabbed hold of an amendment floating around by a Conservative lawmaker, Graham Bradley, and tried to use it to her advantage. It was very strange and a pointless amendment. It said, in a not legally binding manner, that Parliament would back the Brexit deal if alternative arrangement were found for the backstop. What were these alternative arrangements? Well, I'll tell you, we don't know, because Brexiteers constantly talk about this technology which doesn't exist. It's honestly like reading some sort of cyberpunk novel, the way that they talk about it. So what were these alternative arrangements? How do you promise to keep a border open while simultaneously not promising to keep a border open? Bradley couldn't say. Neither could the Prime Minister or any other member of her government. They had no idea what they were doing. They just needed some words, any words they could, to win a majority support in the Commons. The fact that the specific words they chose made no sense was an advantage. If the amendment had made sense, someone would have taken offence as its implications. This is the logic of a fairy tale politics. The most common idea among Brexiteers is that they will use, quote, high-tech solutions to remove the need for checks at the border. But the technology that they are wishing for does not exist anywhere on Earth. It is science fiction, as we just said. And this is absolutely insane that people are going for this. So not only did Braidley's proposition have no meaning, it was common knowledge before it was voted on that it could not be delivered. The EU has closed the talks on the withdrawal agreement. It has made it quite clear that they cannot be reopened. And even if they could, the backstop that took nearly 2 years to negotiate, there would only be 2 months left before Britain leaves the EU. There is not enough time to do whatever whatever it was that lawmakers voted on Tuesday night, on Thursday night, on Tuesday night. That's what made the debate so truly pitiful, and it was. If you watch these debates, it was pathetic. It was the most embarrassing moment in British political history. And the thing is, what's funny is a lot of these Brexiteers are saying, and for the past 2 years they've been saying, oh, it's the EU humiliating us. The EU has been open and honest since day one. It has been the Brexiteers, since even before the referendum, floating around these fantasy ideas that cannot work and will never work, that have put us in the situation now. Those people who have bandied around ridiculous promises and that persist in not telling people and being honest with the public. That is the problem and the situation we are in now. And there are people out there who have been honest and open with the public, but they were branded during the referendum as Project Fear, and still are to this day. So that's what made the debate so truly pitiful. It was a return to the world of fairy tales and hallucinations, the kind of quasi-religious nationalist politics that have fueled the Brexit project from the start. British politicians were confronted with reality and given the chance to fix the problems with Brexit instead of pretending there weren't any, and once again they fled back into myth-making. The country is now on a verge of disaster. On the 29th of March, unless something is done, Britain will fall out of the European Union without a deal that will affect every aspect of the economy. And it looks like it's likely to block cargo at the border, pulverise agricultural exports, trigger shortages of food, medicine and radioactive isotopes, spark employment chaos by suddenly cancelling the mutual recognition of qualifications between British and European institutions, halt the legal basis for data transfer overnight, and lead to massive and sudden flows of immigration in both directions. The list goes on and on. There is no part of society that is unaffected, and yet not only does the British political class seem to understand the consequences of what it is doing, it is lost in populist fantasies instead of addressing the cold reality. And that's the problem where we are at. We've said on this channel from the very beginning, Brexit is a complete fantasy. It is not achievable in any way. And the idea that a lot of these Brexiteers have of, oh, we'll leave, and then we'll just go, oh, 0% tariffs. We've already discussed this. The WTO will not have it. We will be taken to court on the WTO, and we will be forced to accept that. If we do not accept the WTO's recognition, we will be branded a rogue nation. And we have to then accept 0% tariffs from the rest of the world. That will destroy any British company, British manufacturing, agriculture, bang, gone. They will not be able to compete against all these other countries flooding our market with 0% tariffs. It will not be possible. And by the way, this is not going to be reciprocal. The EU is not going to suddenly say, okay, we'll give you 0% tariffs as well, so that we can put our goods in your market as well for 0% tariffs. That is not going to happen. The US is, Donald Trump's not going to suddenly come and say, oh, you're offering 0% tariffs, we'll offer 0% tariffs as well. That is not going to happen. China is not going to say, oh, 0% tariffs, we'll offer you 0% tariffs as well. That is not going to happen. It will destroy this country's any sort of economy we have. It will just not be feasible. And what's so funny is that the Japan agreement has just come into effect, making the European Union and the single market trade bloc one of the biggest and most expansive that is on the planet. We have 53 days of being able to use that. You had Liam Fox tweeting about this, how wonderful it was that British farmers can now send beef to Japan. Well, they can only do that for the next 53 days. You know, it's bizarre. We live in a complete farce with, you know, these Brexiteers unable to accept reality and be honest about reality of the situation, because this has always been about regulation. What made this split between and the Eurosceptics in the in the Conservative Party is regulation. They do not like regulation. Their belief is that the government should have no place in the economy. They do not want any regulation of any shape or form, be it workers' rights, safety, equal pay, you know, minimum wage. By the way, one of the groups that is supporting Brexit has come out and said, yeah, we want to get rid of minimum wage. You know, it's so daft. And I just want to finish this off because this sums up Brexit, to be honest. So, Britain is one of the richest and most advanced democracies in the world. It is currently locked in a room, babbling away to itself hysterically while threatening to blow its own kneecaps off. This is what nationalist populism does to a country. And that's where we are. We are being held hostage by nationalist populists. And there's no way out because they refuse to acknowledge reality. They refuse to acknowledge that Britain has done nothing but benefit from its membership of the European Union. Because they do not like the regulations. And they want to get out of it. Because they have interests themselves, which if they are, say, not in these interests, they're out of it. And for people who will come out and say, oh, but the EU's very sort of, corporatist and, it favours, capitalism, things like that. It is very socially democratic, the European Union. You do realise that. Not only that, my biggest advance to people who say this, what do you think to the EU's anti-tax avoidance schemes? Which, by the way, come into effect just after Brexit, conveniently. This will allow European countries, or shall we say members of the EU, because we're not one, this will allow countries to go after people like Amazon, all these people and companies who engage in tax avoidance schemes, to go after them and reclaim that money. But there we are. There we are. That's the situation we're in. But